July 1954. Tokyo, Japan. Immigration officials at Haneda Airport were processing travelers when they stopped a middle-aged businessman. Nothing seemed unusual about him until they opened his passport. The document was stamped, legal, and official. But the country it was issued from, Taured, did not exist. When they pressed him, he pointed confidently to a map of Europe, showing the exact location of his homeland. But where he pointed, there was only Andorra. Confused, the authorities detained him overnight in a secure hotel room under guard. The next morning, when they went to question him again, he was gone. His passport gone. His belongings gone. Every exit was guarded. He had vanished into thin air. Here's the chilling part. This wasn't the only case. Across history, other travelers have appeared. Men who claim to come from countries that don't exist. Speaking languages no one understands and then disappearing forever. This is the story of the impossible travelers. Alright, let's set the scene here. It's 1954, and Japan is slowly opening back up to the world after World War II. You know? International travel is finally becoming normal again. And Haneda Airport in Tokyo is bustling with businessmen, diplomats, and travelers from all over. Now here's the thing about Japanese immigration officials. They're meticulous. I mean, these guys check everything twice. So when a well-dressed, middle-aged European businessman walks up to their counter that July morning, they're doing their usual thorough inspection. The man seemed perfectly normal. Nice suit, confident demeanor, spoke decent English. But when they opened his passport, that's when everything went sideways. The passport itself looked completely legitimate. Proper stamps, official seals, the works. But it was issued by a country called Taured. And here's where it gets weird. The officials had never heard of Taured. So they asked the man about it, and he just looked at them like they were crazy. To him, this was completely normal. So the immigration officers are looking at this passport, right? And it's not some crude forgery. This thing had entry stamps from France, Spain, and even previous entries into Japan. All the stamps looked official, all the dates checked out. This guy had been traveling internationally for years with this document. But when they pulled out a map of Europe to ask him to show them where Taured was located, that's when things got really strange. The man confidently pointed to a spot between France and Spain, exactly where the tiny country of Andorra sits today. Now here's what's wild. The man insisted that Taured had been there for over 1,000 years. He wasn't confused, he wasn't hesitant, he was absolutely certain. To him, Andorra didn't exist. In his world, it was Taured. The officials didn't know what to make of this. I mean, what do you do with someone who has official documents from a country that doesn't exist? Okay, so the authorities decide they need to dig deeper. They bring the man in for questioning, and that's when this case goes from weird to absolutely mind-bending. The businessman didn't just have a passport. He had a complete set of documents. A driver's license from Taured, bank statements, business cards, even currency that no one recognized. Everything was perfectly consistent with his story. He told them he was on a business trip, that he'd been to Japan several times before, even showed them his hotel reservation, and could name the company he was supposed to meet with. But when officials contacted that company, here's the kicker, they had no record of any meeting. The man grew increasingly agitated as the interrogation went on. You could see he was genuinely confused about why they didn't know about his country. To him, this was like someone not knowing about France or Germany. Now, the Japanese authorities weren't about to let this guy just walk away. I mean, they had someone with documents from a non-existent country. This was serious business. So they placed him under guard at the Hotel Imperial in Tokyo. 2 guards stationed outside his room, no way out except through the main corridor. The plan was simple. Hold him overnight, contact international authorities in the morning, and figure out what the hell was going on. But when morning came and the guards opened his door, the room was empty. Not just empty. It was like the man had never been there at all. His clothes, his mysterious documents, his impossible passport, everything was gone. Here's what's really unsettling, though. The hotel was under complete surveillance. Every exit was watched. The guards never left their posts. There was literally no way for him to leave that room without being seen, yet somehow he just vanished into thin air. Now, here's where things get stranger. Because this wasn't the first time something like this had happened. Let me take you back to 1850, Frankfurt an der Oder. a small town on the German-Polish border. Local police found a man wandering the streets, completely disoriented. His name, he said, was Jophar Vorin. Vorin spoke a language that no one could identify, though he also knew some broken German. When authorities questioned him, he claimed to come from a country called Laxaria, located in a region he called Sacria. The thing is, no such places existed on any map. But just like our man from Taured, Vorin wasn't lying or making things up. He genuinely believed these places were real, even drew detailed maps showing the geography of his homeland. What made Vorin's case even more compelling was his story. He told authorities he was searching for his lost brother who had supposedly shipwrecked somewhere in the region. Vorin had been traveling for months, trying to find any trace of him. A local pastor, who tried to help translate and understand Vorin's language, noted that the man seemed educated and sincere. This was on someone trying to pull a con. He was genuinely lost and desperate to find his brother. But here's what's haunting about this case. Despite the pastor's efforts and the authorities' investigation, no one ever figured out where Jophar Vorin really came from. After a few weeks in Frankfurt and Deroder, he simply disappeared one day, just like our businessman from Taured. Believe it or not, Vorin's case wasn't unique either. Just a year later, in 1851, another mysterious stranger appeared in the same region of Germany. This man also claimed to be from Laxaria and spoke the same unidentifiable language. What's really strange is that this second man seemed to know about Vorin. When authorities mentioned the previous case, the man became excited, saying he was also searching for someone from his homeland. But just like before, after a few weeks of investigation that led nowhere, this second traveler vanished without a trace. Two men, 1 year apart, both claiming to come from the same impossible country that doesn't exist on any map. You know what's really unsettling about these cases? The consistency. These weren't random hoaxers making up stories. They had detailed knowledge of their supposed homelands, consistent languages, and genuine emotional reactions to their situations. So what's going on here? Over the decades, investigators and researchers have proposed several theories. But honestly, none of them fully explain these cases. The hoax theory seems obvious, right? Maybe these were just elaborate scams or confused individuals? But here's the problem with that. The documents in these cases weren't crude forgeries. The Taured passport had legitimate-looking stamps from real countries. Jophar Vorin could draw detailed maps of his homeland and speak a consistent, complex language. Some people have suggested parallel dimensions or time slips. The idea that these men somehow crossed over from alternate realities where their countries actually exist. It sounds like science fiction, but it would explain the consistency and genuine confusion these travelers showed. Mental illness is another theory, but it doesn't account for the physical evidence. How would someone with delusions create official-looking documents or develop an entirely new language? The truth is, after more than 70 years since the Taured incident and over 170 years since Jophar Vorin, we still don't have definitive answers. What really gets to me about these cases is the pattern. These weren't isolated incidents or one-off mysteries. We're talking about multiple cases across different countries and time periods, all following the same basic template. A traveler appears with documents from a non-existent country. They're not lying or trying to deceive anyone. They genuinely believe their homeland exists. They have consistent stories, detailed knowledge, and sometimes even physical evidence. Then, just as mysteriously as they appeared, they vanish. And here's something that really makes you think. In each case, the local authorities took these situations seriously. These weren't dismissed as pranks or obvious hoaxes. Trained officials, police, and immigration workers all found these cases compelling enough to investigate thoroughly. The Japanese immigration officials in 1954 were experienced professionals. The German authorities in the 1850s weren't easily fooled either. These were people who dealt with forged documents and false identities regularly, and they were stumped. So here we are, decades and centuries later, and we still don't know who these men really were. The businessman at Haneda Airport in 1954, Jophar Vorin in 1850s Germany, the second man from Laxaria in 1851, they all appeared with stories that cannot be explained, documents that should not exist, and identities tied to nations that have never been on any map. And then they vanished. You know what keeps me up at night thinking about this? It's not just the mystery of where these men came from. It is the possibility that there might be others. Right now, as you're watching this, are there people walking among us who don't belong to this world at all? Think about it. In our connected, documented world of 2025, could someone still slip through the cracks with an impossible identity? Or have we become so surveilled and tracked that the impossible travelers can no longer appear? Maybe that's why these cases are so compelling. They represent something we've lost in our modern world: genuine mystery. Places on the map that don't exist, people with no past and no future. Stories that refuse to be explained away. The man from Taured knew exactly where his country was supposed to be. Jophar Vorin could draw you a map of Laxaria from memory. These were unconfused wanderers. They were men who knew their place in a world that did unknow them back. Perhaps most unsettling of all, they were absolutely certain they belonged here. If this mystery fascinated you as much as it fascinated me, let me know in the comments below. Have you ever heard of similar cases? Do you think these men were time travelers, dimensional drifters, or something else entirely? Don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into history's most puzzling mysteries, because sometimes the most compelling stories are the ones that refuse to give us answers. Thanks for watching The Man from Nowhere. Till next time, keep questioning what you think you know about reality.